Erratic behaviour, an explosive temper, relentless shouting, screaming and hitting. That's what one of MP Peter Bones' former aides described what it was like to work with him.
Well, last night the House of Commons voted to suspend the MP for Wellingborough and Rushden for 6 weeks. That could lead to yet another by-election for the Conservatives. But it seems Bones' constituents are split on their verdict on the MP, with some saying they'd still vote for him in spite of the allegations.
Seeing is believing, or whatever. I mean, people can go along with comments for the rest of their life, and it's not a yes or it's not a no. I mean, what can you say about that? There's no answer, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
And did you vote for him before? Would you vote for him again?
I've voted him before, and I will vote for him again, yeah.
It's very important, not only Peter Bone, but anyone for that matter, who is in a public figure. I think they should conduct themselves in a reasonable manner.
I did vote for him, and I'll vote for him again because I'm happy with him. The job he's doing, maybe some people say something different, but personally, I'm really happy with it.
Of course, he denies the allegations, but I mean, it's been alleged. It's been alleged, and he has to prove his innocence. And if it's found out that he's actually guilty for what he's done, you know, he needs to resign.
Now, for more reaction on this story, let's speak to Holly Whitbread, a Conservative councillor for Epping. Holly, what do you make of Peter Bones' suspension, and how do you think this is going to affect the Tory party as a whole?
Well, obviously, if true, it's very disappointing to see such behaviour in an MP, and it may well lead to another by-election, which obviously would not be good news for the government at the moment following the by-elections that we've just had. However, it's up to the people in Peter Bones' constituency now to recall him, and they need 10% of people to call that election. So, obviously, I don't think Rishi would welcome a by-election at the moment.
God, no. And he, of course, denies the allegations, but the committee did find there to be some wrongdoing. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding often with this kind of thing, with members of the public saying, well, he's not been tried in a court of law, but there's no suggestion that this would actually be taken onto a criminal matter.
I would say something which I think you probably will agree with. Any behaviour like that is reprehensible and wrong. I'm not surprised amongst our MPs. I think our MPs are at this moment in time probably at the lowest stock they've ever been.
Pestminster.
What concerns me, and I've said this before about celebrities in the world, you are innocent in this country until you're proven guilty. And I remember when we talked about the Met Police the other day about marking their own homework. It concerns me. I mean, there should be an independent inquiry into this. I'm not quite sure.
But there is a commission.
That's good, because I'm not sure about MPs getting involved voting on it. They need to look at it. If this is right, the guy should go. Quite interesting, that cross-section of people giving their opinions in the constituency, though. Holly, good to meet you. Good to have you on. I've heard great things about you. So I'm going to ask you the obvious thing. There seems to be a split emerging inside the Labour Party. Keir Starmer, and I've been very supportive of how very, very quick he was to come out 3 weeks ago, as quick as Sunak to say quite rightly that those terrorist attacks were abhorrent. He was on LBC the other day and upset some Muslim councillors in his party. And he's now, it seems, under pressure to change tack and call for a ceasefire. What's your opinion? What's your take on this morning?
Well, like you, actually, I was impressed by Keir Starmer when he first reacted to the awful atrocities in Israel the other week. And actually, I think he did a good job, and members of the shadow cabinet, like David Lammy, really did a good job. Obviously, there are divisions within the Labour Party, and I think that he's starting to soften his position. We saw him completely avoid it in PMQs yesterday, which is disappointing, because ultimately, if Keir Starmer wants to be Prime Minister of this country, he's got to be diplomatic. But he's now seen probably a quarter of the Parliamentary Labour Party really standing up against his previous position.
Didn't some shadow minister yesterday stand up, I don't know what her name was, and say there needs to be a ceasefire? It's a difficult one for Starmer. It's a difficult one for broadcasters. What are you supposed to do? He wants to get to number 10, and that's what the country would expect. But what does he do if his party's fractured?
No, he has called for humanitarian pauses. I think the issue was, initially, when he spoke to Nick Ferrari in that interview, he was asked how he felt about the Israel situation. He said, Israel has a right to defend herself. Nick Ferrari then says, well, what about cutting off fuel and water? And then he repeated that phrase, well, Israel, yes, has a right to defend. And so there was this conflation of ideas, which is he's kind of backtracking on now, which doesn't show leadership. He should have initially said, in my opinion, know that, you know, no country should have a right to
But the
cut
problem
off
he's got, Nick, he
food
can't
and
say that
fuel
to the
and
Labour
water.
Party because it will split them. And by the way, and this is not me being anti-Labour and pro-Tory or anti-Tory and pro-Labour. This is, Holly, the most difficult thing in the world to broadcast about, whether you're a politician or a broadcaster. Nick and I, we were just saying, weren't we? You can only report the facts. You can't get this right. Nobody wants to agree that those terrorists should be anything other than exterminated. But anybody with a brain cell, as I keep saying, doesn't want to see the horrors in Gaza.
Yes, but was he wrong to have said in that initial interview that Israel had a right to cut off fuel and water? And that's what's upset a lot of Muslim councillors, isn't it?
I think, you know, ultimately it's about acting within the rules of war and acting in a humanitarian way.
And he said that, to be fair, in the interview, but it just didn't come across as clear as it could have.
No, so I think perhaps he should be careful with his words, as we all are when talking about this. But ultimately, I think he is now showing weakness and backtracking on his position, which actually, from the public's point of view, they want to see the next leader of this country potentially be firm and strong and consistent.
But when the majority of polling that has come out over the past week has said that the general public are in favour of a ceasefire, certainly for humanitarian pauses to war and
That's
destruction.
the Labour phrase this morning, humanitarian.
Yes. So when the majority of the public are calling for that, is he showing leadership by doubling down, or is he actually showing leadership by going, do you know what, I made a mistake and I can reassess my
Good
position?
point. Why can't you change your mind? Is that not a good politician?
Well, I think when we saw them awful terrorist attacks in Israel last week, absolutely Israel has a right to defend itself. And that's my position on it. Obviously, they have to act within the rules of war, but I believe that is the right position. And that's the position this government are taking. And actually, yes, providing support to the innocent Palestinians. And I know humanitarian aid was dropped into Egypt yesterday, which is absolutely the right thing to do. But I think we need to have a consistent, strong position on this.
Agreed. Well,
just very quickly, they'll shout at me, 30 seconds. Tim Davie, the boss of the BBC, called to the 1922 Backbench Committee of Tory MPs yesterday to explain what they believe is the BBC's handling of the terror attacks in Israel. They won't still call, these people terrorists, they're militants. Your thoughts very quickly, Holly Whitbread.
Yeah, apparently he had a really hard time at the 1922 committee, and actually quite rightly. I think the BBC not using the word terrorist is the wrong thing. And actually it's the first of many cases of the BBC potentially showing bias over recent years. So it's good that, first of all, he got a grilling from the backbench MPs, and I think he goes to all different political parties. But I do think the BBC needs to, yes, be neutral, but actually call things out in line with the government's language as well as the language of the general public too.
Well, Holly Whitbread, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Holly.